sometimes we touch on it, but it's always interesting to me. I know a lot of people like the lead up to the draft. I always find the post draft more interesting because I like to see how teams ended up approaching things, how pieces fit together. And a lot of times, who a team drafts, it says a lot about what they think of their current team, but also their team 2 or 3 years from now. We're going to get into that positionally, but I actually, like I said, I might be in the minority here, but I find this week or so after the draft, kind of going through and seeing how teams approached it, to be the most interesting part.
Yeah, I agree with you because I think it gives you, to your point, a better idea or a better understanding of what their thought process was and why did they take the players they did and how are these pieces going to fit. I tend to like it more as well, and I'm going to get on my, I'm going to get on my soapbox later on, and I'm going to kick people off my lawn closer to the end of the show in regards to the draft because, to be honest with you, um, I despise what it's become. And that's why, to your point, I have grown to appreciate the week after more because we can go back, we can look at what they did, we can have conversation about how the pieces are going to fit, and we can also have conversations as to whether or not these players are actually going to help the Patriots. So let's start there. Obviously, on Thursday night, round one, the New England Patriots with the 4th overall pick select LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell. We talked about this at the end of night one. We both universally agreed. Good pick. He's going to be a good player. He fills your biggest need. It was a gaping hole at left tackle. But I think more than what he's going to do on the field, I just being around him and seeing him talk and getting the sense of what he's like, I think this kid's going to bring a lot more to this organization than just what he's going to do on the field. I think he's going to do a lot for this team in the locker room. I think he's going to do a lot for this team in the meeting room. I don't want to speculate as to what he's going to do for them in the community or not. I'm sure he's going to do plenty in the community. But from a football point of view, he's going to do a lot for this football team, and it's going to transcend in many ways what he does just on the football field.
Yeah, and this is an organization that allowed Super Bowl champion leaders to leave this offseason, whether it was Jonathan Jones and Dietrich Wise leaving in free agency, the release of David Andrews. So they're kind of in search of that next generation of leaders, if you will. And if you look at this team, like Christian Gonzalez, Keon White, Kyle Duggar, some of those young pieces on defense, they're good guys, it seems like, but they're quieter guys, right? And then offensively, Drake May seems like there's leadership skills there, but it's only one guy. So you want some other guys. Could it be a Christian Barmore growing into a role more with some of those vets gone? Could it be a guy like a Will Campbell over the next couple of years? So I think that's a piece of this as well. Now, the most important thing is how he's going to produce on the field. And you and I agree. We think he's going to be good for the Patriots, whether it's at guard or tackle. You definitely are in on tackle. I'm leaning tackle with him anyway. And I think that's the most important thing. But this other side of it, that edge, like their offensive line, we know it's been bad for several years. It also has lacked a guy with an edge really since Joe Thuney left in free agency.
Yes.
And if you look at when their offensive line was good, whether it was say Damian Woody and Mike Compton, and then Logan Mankins, and then Sebastian Vollmer, and then Joe Thuney. Like they always had one or two guys that had some sort of an edge to them. Doesn't mean they were bad guys or dirty players, but just that edge to them. And it feels like Will Campbell is going to bring that because Morgan Moses is a true pro, played over 1,000 snaps in 5 years. He's a leader. Mike Onwenu is a good player, but I don't see those guys as super edge guys that bring a mean streak to him, right? And I think Moses is a leader, but still, you look at it long term, he might only be here a couple of years. So I think Will Campbell can kind of fill that piece of the role as well.
Yeah, and again, look, we're going to, and not necessarily me and you, but I think people are going to debate whether or not he's a left tackle or a left guard. I think it's a stupid conversation. You know that I have felt it's been a stupid conversation all along because my feeling on it is you start him at left tackle, you let him play there as long as possible. You can't tell me that if he has a rough rookie season, after 1 year, you're going to move him off left tackle. You got to give him a legitimate look there to make sure that he is your left tackle of the now and the future. So my view on it is give him a legitimate shot at left tackle. If, let's say, after a year and a half, 2 seasons, it doesn't work, then you slide him inside the left guard. If that works, great. You end up salvaging the pick. You get a player out of it. But to already be having this conversation, even after the fact, to be having this conversation as to whether or not this kid is going to stick at left tackle Why don't we give him minicamp? Why don't we give him OTAs? Why don't we give him a training camp? Heck, why don't we give him his rookie season before we start passing judgment on him as a left tackle and determining whether or not he could stay there? I just, again, so much has been made about the arm length stuff. Guess what? They drafted a tackle this weekend with long arms. So I hope people that are into arm length, which, by the way, I'm glad Elliot Wolf said this the other night, the arm length measurement has only really been an evaluation tool now for about 10 years. Okay. I've been covering the draft for 25. It was never a topic of conversation 25, 20 years ago, even 15 years ago. But it's a topic of conversation now somehow. So, the arm length crew out there got their guy yesterday in Marcus Bryant, and we'll talk about him. But at the end of the day, you have to give him a legitimate shot to be your left tackle. This is not a short-term evaluation. Oh, he can't play. You got to kick him inside. And Vrabel alluded to this on Thursday night, John. He's going to have bad plays. He's going to get beat. That is life. He's not the perfect prospect. That prospect has never existed, and it never will. He has flaws. He's going to have flaws. He's going to have bad snaps. He's going to have bad games. It's going to happen. We cannot over-critique this kid. We cannot judge him on a snap-to-snap basis. We got to do it over an entire body of work. We got to do it on a week-to-week basis, and then we can make the determination whether or not he's good enough to stick at left tackle.
And I think what's going to be helpful is, and I know you said give him the whole year, and I'm not disagreeing, but I think we're going to have a pretty good idea by the end of training camp whether he's going to be able to develop into a left tackle. And I say that because you look at who he's going to be going against. Like Keon White is a good edge pass rusher, and I know he's had some inconsistent production, but the skills are there. Anthony Jennings is a really good run defender on the edge. So like he's going to be going against those guys every day. The Patriots, Vrabel has said they're going to have joint practices. They may even do it against two teams instead of one like the last few years. So I think we're going to have a pretty good idea by the end of training camp, like, hey, this dude can develop into a left tackle, and obviously then give him time throughout this, his rookie season to continue that development. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a player that no matter where they end up having him, like if he's at left tackle, it's a home run pick and he's going to be a good left tackle. If he ends up being a left guard, yeah, I might complain that they drafted a starting left guard at 4, and that's, a little high for a starting left guard, but it's still valuable to have that guy, right? Like, I mean, how many times have they given up pressure up the middle in the last 5 years and struggled really, like I said before, since Joe Thuney left, right? Like ever since then, they've struggled to protect up the middle. A young quarterback like Drake May, that's an extremely important thing to have is protection up the middle. So obviously, look, if he's at left tackle and he's good, picks a home run. If he ends up at guard, I'm not going to like it as much, but it's still valuable to have. Like that's saying this is not Isaiah Wynn, where like he wasn't a good left tackle and that was it. And there was nowhere he could move. Like this is a guy that could be good at multiple positions, right? Or same thing with Cole Strange, like injury issues, not really good enough at left guard. Now they're sitting there like, what do we do with this guy? Like this is a much better player than those two guys.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. But even when they drafted Isaiah Wynn in 2018, I made the point that at 6'4", he's not going to last at left tackle. Yeah. They have to kick him inside, which they did eventually before moving on from him. But they waited too long. They should have done that sooner. He was never a tackle. And I think it's important to point this out, John. You can get away with a 6'4" guy at right tackle. You can get away with it if he's athletic, if he's got some length to him in terms of his arm length, if he can move laterally, if he can establish an edge for you in the run game, you can live with him at right tackle. At left tackle, vertical length does matter, though, because it's all about getting to a spot, getting into your kick set, setting up, determining when that point of engagement is coming, when you want to shoot your hands. All that stuff matters more at left tackle because it's your blind side protector. So Campbell has that advantage where he's 6'6" and change. The other thing is he's got terrific footwork. He's a really good athlete. He is a good run blocker. He is a natural bender as a pass blocker. I want to see more of him in terms of dropping his ass and dropping his hips in the run game. But as a pass blocker, he's really good. And I had people say to me, you say that, but I see him getting shocked a lot and he gets pushed back. Yeah, but guess what? When you go back and you evaluate those reps, though, he's winning those reps because he's creating a stalemate, and he's creating it enough at a spot where his quarterback can still function in the pocket. So again, to me, it's easy to sit here and say, oh, the short arms, this or that. And you've been on this from the beginning. Okay, Rashawn Slater has 33-inch arms. He's a pretty damn good left tackle.
He's prevented Joe Alt from moving over. That's how good he's been. Yeah,
yes.
and like it's
he
funny
was a first-round pick out of Northwestern.
Yeah, and I mean, if offensive lineman could ever win Rookie of the Year, I mean, Rashawn Slater would have been my pick a few years ago. But you talked about his feet. What impresses me most about Will Campbell is his hands and the strength of his hands. Because
Yes.
when he gets
Very good hand
engaged,
work.
yeah, when he gets engaged with guys, generally they don't get away. Like you even mentioned those reps where sometimes he gets shocked back a little. And yeah, I don't always love to see that. But to your point, he's not getting pushed backwards. Like he might get stood up sometimes, but he's not getting pushed back into the quarterback, and guys aren't getting away from him. And even the guys who come around fast off the edge, once he gets hands on guys, they don't get away. And I think that's really valuable at the NFL level too, where you have guys who use a bunch of different pass rushing moves. And week to week, you're going to have a big variance. Like 1 week, it might be a speed rusher, it might be a power rusher. A lot of guys in the NFL can do both. So rep to rep, there could be difference. So I think, again, I know you mentioned his feet and they're impressive, but to me, the handwork stands out the most.
Yeah, and at the risk of sounding like Mel Kiper, who I thought had a bad weekend this weekend in Green Bay, at the risk of sounding like him or even turning into him, I think a lot of the conversation about Will Campbell, too, illustrates people's lack of knowledge about offensive line play. And again, and this goes to my bigger point about player evaluation. You got to be careful talking about players from an evaluation standpoint. If I'm going to sound like that a-hole, that highfalutin a-hole when I say this, John, but you got to be careful when you're evaluating players getting out of your lane and talking out of turn and saying something that's going to make you sound stupid. And I think a lot of people sounded stupid during the evaluation of Will Campbell personally. Okay. Yeah. Now, look, I may end up looking like a total jerk in about 7-8 months from now when he's struggling and the arm length is a problem and he's not getting established as the team's left tackle and they could have a potential problem on their hands. Sure, I could look like a total jerk around December when it comes to all this stuff. But at the end of the day, I do think it's important to be realistic here of what the kid could be. And I'm glad Vrabel said what he said about he's not going to win every rep, and he's not. But this idea that one area of his game is going to hinder his development so much that he's not going to develop into a quality player is asinine to me. It's asinine, and I think it illustrates just how little people truly know about offensive line play and how they don't even really understand it if you're getting hung up on one thing. But the thing that really pisses me off, John, is that people think they do understand it. And I'm sitting there going, there's way more to this. There's way more to this in arm length. I've been an offensive line coach for a long time. I've coached tackles. If arm length was the only determining factor, great, but it's not. There are other things that we look at when we evaluate tackle play that are more important than arm length. But you wouldn't know that listening to people. You wouldn't know. You would have thought that this kid was a T-Rex. You wouldn't think he had a shot to play in the NFL the way some of these people were talking about him. So, again, at the risk of turning into Mel Kiper this weekend, it just really bothered me that when we're evaluating this kid, and I'm not saying you and I, but when people were evaluating this kid, they weren't taking a look at him from a broader lens. It was all about the arms. They're not long enough. He's not going to make it. And quite frankly, these opinions were also coming from people that shouldn't even have one. They're talking out of their ass, and that's what annoyed me about it. And I get it. We're living in a world now with social media and everything else where people are going to be more opinionated and say what they want to say. That's fine. I've always been a firm believer if I don't know anything about a topic, I'm not going to open my mouth because I don't want to look like a fool. But at the end of the day, I think we need to go easy with the arm nonsense. Let's put that to bed now. He's a Patriot. Like you said, let's see what he does this spring. Let's see what he does in camp. Let's see what he does as a rookie before we cast an official judgment on him.
Yeah, and a couple points off that. Like you and I have talked about this. Like most people don't care about the offensive line until it sucks, and then all of a sudden they care and they
Yes,
notice. Like they don't
it's
compliment it
like
when
with kickers. They don't care about the kicker until he misses
yeah,
a
like
kick
they
that
don't
matters.
compliment them when they're playing well or whatever. They only and also too, and I think I mentioned this the other night. Like a lot of people say they want to fix the offensive line until it actually comes time to fix the offensive line and
Right,
invest the resources.
right.
And then you want to draft Travis Hunter or Tet McMillan or Ashton Genty. Again, those guys could be good players. I'm not, but it's like everybody wants to fix the offensive line until it actually comes time to fix it. And you have to invest. And I think a lot of people too were hoping, John, that they were going to sign Morgan Moses and Ronnie Stanley in free agency and draft whoever they wanted in the top 5, which would have been great. I mean, I would have been happy with that too, but it's not the way it worked out. And one last point for me on Will Campbell, and this is just kind of not a technical eval thing, but kind of a common sense thing. You look at the LSU offense, and what have they done a lot the last couple of years, especially 2 years ago with Jaden Daniels? They threw the ball deep a ton, right? They had Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, and even last year with those guys gone, they love to push the football down the field, right? Well, you can't do that if you don't hold up front. So, and he was part of that. And there were plenty of times, and you saw this, that they would isolate him at left tackle. They would slide protection to the right, leave him on an island, and he still held up against really good edge rushers for them to throw the ball
In the
35,
best
40.
conference in America,
Yeah,
nonetheless.
35, 40, 45 yards downfield. Like that takes 3 or 4 seconds of legit protection to develop. And he was able to hold up and the whole LSU offensive line was. But I think that's not a technical thing, but just when you zoom out and kind of look at it from a common sense standpoint, like LSU has run the ball reasonably well the past couple of years. They've gained a bunch of yards and they've thrown the ball deep. You have to have a good offensive line and you have to especially have a good left tackle to do those things.
Yeah, and if you think about it, even going into last season, we weren't just talking about Will Campbell. We were also talking about Emory Jones, who also got drafted this weekend. He got drafted by the Baltimore Ravens. So we were talking about 2 guys on that LSU offensive line that potentially could have been first-round picks. Jones ended up slipping. I still think he could be a pretty good player for Baltimore. But the bottom line is, to your point, he was left on an island a lot, and he held up. He held up in a conference which had 79 players drafted this weekend. So this idea that, well, the short arms, that's it. He's got short arms. He's doomed. Why even bother? Pump the brakes. Let's see what he does in his first year before we start having this conversation as to whether or not he's going to suck. All right. Now, in the second round, and in many ways, John, this might have been their most controversial pick. I love the pick. I absolutely love the pick. I think it's a home run pick. I know that there's been some trepidation with folks, and I know even you kind of said this yourself, that did they need to take a running back in the second round? Was this a need? Was this really a position they needed to address? We both agreed, though, that the one thing you're getting here is you're getting a playmaker. Whether you think running back is a need or not, you're getting a guy in Travion Henderson who has the potential to be a difference maker. I love this pick, especially with Josh McDaniels back. We both said this the other night. This was a Josh McDaniels pick. He had to have banged the table for this kid. I think he's going to be a terrific fit in this system. I love this pick. I think he gives them something they desperately lack, which is big play potential.
Yeah, so my preference would have been Donovan Ezaraku in the second round there, but with them not going to him, look, Travion Henderson, and it's similar to what I said about Will Campbell. Like, this is a good player. And I know that sounds obvious to say, but how many times in recent years, I mean, they passed up a good player in Trent McDuffie to draft Cole Strange. They passed up a good player in George Pickens to draft Tyquan Thornton. Like, then those are just 2 examples, but there's been several times where they've passed up a just flat out good player for other measurables or whatever. I mean, they passed up Lad McConkey for Jalen Polk. And Polk was, I thought Polk would be better than he was, but it's like you passed up a guy that was a legit good football player because there were maybe other measurables or pieces of value that you liked. So with Henderson, the speed element that he brings, and that's the key word with me is speed. The speed element he brings, I can't think of the last time they had that true speed in the backfield. Like even James White, and I love James White, I'm talking this dude against Texas, catch and run for 75-yard touchdown right before halftime of a semifinal playoff game. Like, I can't think of the last time the Patriots had a running back with that breakaway speed. Like, that's impressive. Like, they tried it, I guess, with Pierre Strong, and he failed. But To have a guy like that, I think, is really valuable. I'd like to see how he does between the tackles, but the breakaway speed, the pass catching ability, and I know you'll love this, the pass protection ability, to me, it gives him the potential. This won't happen, but it gives him the potential to play on all three downs.
Yeah, I don't think he does it as a rookie, but to your point, depending on what ends up happening with Stevenson after this season, Gibson, they could potentially move off from both of them. If that happens and he has a good enough rookie year, he could potentially be your starting running back in 2026. Certainly, he checks off a lot of boxes. You mentioned the pass pro, best pass blocking running back in this draft class, most explosive running back in this draft class. And as far as running inside the tackles, yeah, that's not a strength of his. He's not that COD guy that's gonna stick his foot in the ground, make that one hard cut and go. He's at his best pressing the line of scrimmage, reading his blocks, sticking his foot in the ground, and getting vertical up the alley. He's going to be at his best on outside zone, toss, crack toss, power, those kinds of plays. That's where I think you're going to get the most out of him as a runner. But then let's not forget what he brings to the table as a receiver, John. I mean, he is a dynamic playmaker in the passing game. You can motion him out into a slot alignment, and he can run a full receiver route tree. You can align him out of the huddle as a slot receiver or even as a split end. He can do a lot of different things for you in the passing game. So he is, in my view, he was the best back in this draft. I liked Omarion Hampton as well and Ashton Jeanty. But in my opinion, I had him as the number one back in this draft class, Jeanty 2, Hampton 3, because I felt he was the most complete back. When you look at Jeanty, you look at Hampton, you can pick holes in their games when it comes to pass pro and what they can do as receivers. And do they have enough touches in the passing game to truly judge them that way, specifically Jeanty? But I think Henderson was the most complete back in this draft. I love this pick at 38. This is a guy that I felt should have gone in the 25 to 32 range. The fact that you're getting him at 38, and this is how we also have to look at this if we want to be objective. The fact that you got him at 38, that's a really good value there when you look at the player and his body of work. For me, the only concern I have about him, John, is can he stay healthy? 2022, 2023, he had some injury stuff. He's got to prove that he can stay healthy. But if he does, he's going to be a dynamic playmaker.
And that's what's encouraging about last year, right? He was healthy all year. And granted, he was part of the tandem with Judkins, but he was healthy all year.
A lot because he didn't have to be the guy.
And I think if you look at projecting him out long term, like if he's part of a trio with Stevenson and Gibson this year and going forward as part of a duo, whether it's with Stevenson or with another player in 2026 and beyond, you could have yourself a really dynamic backfield. And that's been the thing too. Like Stevenson in 2021, his rookie year, really dynamic. Granted, I think he played 12 or 13 games, but had 600 yards rushing. He was dynamic. In 2022, Stevenson put up really good numbers, but I felt like part of that was Matt Patricia was force feeding him in that offense because they didn't have that much depth in their offense. And it felt like Stevenson regressed a little in 2023. Then he had that late season injury. And last year he had some moments, but he lost 7 fumbles. Like it feels like he's a player to me that's kind of plateaued. And from an explosiveness perspective, you kind of have he's hit the ceiling of his explosiveness, whereas Henderson comes in and just adds this explosive element. You hit the nail on the head in the pass game, but also just if that dude gets to the second level in the run game, like he can run away from people. And that's something, again, they just haven't had that element in a long time. I think this is going to be a guy that by late September, a lot of Patriots fans are going to love because he's going to make a few, like he's going to be that guy, I think, early on, maybe gets 7 or 8 touches a game, and one of them's a 25-yard game. And then all of a sudden he hits a 40-yard touchdown. And before you know it, he's getting 15 touches a game and going from there.
All right, now let's move on to their third-round pick, their first of 2 third-round picks, wide receiver Kyle Williams out of Washington State. He was picked at pick 69 by the Patriots. Explosive receiver who is about 5'10", 190 pounds, give or take, maybe a little taller than 5'10", probably 5'10" and change, about 190 pounds, has experience playing the Z, the F, and the X. He started his career at UNLV before transferring to Washington State the last 2 years where he played with John Mateer and former Bryant quarterback Zevi Eckhouse. He caught 61 passes 2 years ago, John, 70 passes last year. Thing about Williams that, look, I thought this is a one pick that I was a little on the fence about it, and I'll tell you why in a sec. But the one thing that really pops to me about Kyle Williams is he is the best receiver in this draft at creating separation with his release. Terrific at using his hips and his feet and his head nod to create separation at the line of scrimmage and stack a receiver. I mean, he puts on a clinic when you watch him release. It's Devontae Adams-esque, in my opinion. I think it's that elite, that part of his game is that elite. Now, he is an explosive vertical playmaker who can make plays on seam routes, corner routes, slot fades, and posts. But I don't think when you look at where this receiving core is right now, John, I thought they needed to add more size. I thought Elliott Wolf talked about the need to have that big X receiver that can play on the backside of trips and generate matchups for you, specifically in the red zone. They don't get that here. I know Williams has played plenty of X during his college career, but he's not your traditional matchup X that's going to force a defensive coordinator to either have to put his best corner over there or to get creative with combination coverages on the backside. I'm not sure he's going to draw that much attention. Now, all that being said, he's dynamic. He's explosive. He averaged over 16 yards a catch on perimeter screens. And when you watch him run perimeter screens, he's really smooth and fluid, and he catches the ball well away from his body, and he's able to fit into his blocks. So there's a lot to like about his game. My only question is, should they have gone bigger? I know you were a big Alec and Luminor guy. Should they have gone bigger? Or if they wanted that big play element, did they drop the ball passing on a guy like Jalen Royals, who eventually ended up in Kansas City?
Yeah, to me, John, I think this is their riskiest pick of the entire draft. And
I
say
agree
that
with you. I think it's got the most boomer bust potential.
Yeah, because and part of that is his game, right? He's a great downfield threat. You know, he'll catch 40-yard touchdowns. You met at the line of scrimmage, his releases are terrific. So I do love that. But this is a clear choice by them because they could have traded up for Trey Harris. They could have taken Jaden Higgins in the second round. They also, you mentioned Jalen Royals. Like there were other guys that are maybe bigger, prototypical X receivers they could have taken, and they chose Kyle Williams. And look, the attributes, the speed, right, his separation at the line of scrimmage are there. Has had some issues holding on to the football, though, and I wonder what is his game in the short area because we know Josh McDaniels' offense, not that they won't throw the ball down the field. I mean, Randy Moss caught 23 touchdowns in this offense. Chris Hogan led the NFL in yards per reception in this offense. So they will throw the ball downfield, but it's still more of a intermediate to short area passing game. So I wonder how he's going to be at that. So again, I think he has a lot of potential, but I do think this is their quote unquote riskiest pick, just given what they passed up and his fit in this offense going forward. But I bet you, John, he's going to be a guy we see at training camp, and he's going to make a few plays that pop. It's going to be the consistency, and can he do it at all three levels? Just like Javon Baker last year, made a few plays in training camp, popped a little, but that was it. Like, can Kyle Williams be more complete?
Elliott Wolf was asked about Kyle Williams on Friday night when he met with the assembled media after rounds 2 and 3. And Wolf said he's fast, can play outside and inside, really good with the ball in his hands. For an undersized guy, he's really tough. He doesn't shy away from anything. He can block. We had the opportunity to visit with him on his 30 visit here, and he really has a great personality. And we're excited about what he's going to add from that perspective. So obviously they like the diversity in his game. And I think when you look at this receiving core right now, they have 10 receivers on the roster. Obviously, there's a glut there. I'm curious to see how they approach this from a competition evaluation standpoint now, because he's going to make this team. Stephon Diggs is going to make this team. Matt Collins is going to make this team. Then, now you have those three guys. Then it's like, okay, let's assume they carry 6, and we're going to be able to debate this the rest of this offseason. But let's assume they carry 6 receivers. Who are the next 3? Because they have a legitimate glut there now. So who are the next 3? It's a Bob Douglas. Is it Kendrick Bourne? Is it Kayshon Boutte? What about Jalen Polk? What about Javon Baker? So there's some legitimate question marks there. And I've had a couple fans ask this, and I saw this online as well. He's a better player than Thornton was. He's a better player than Thornton was when they drafted him.
And I feel like, too, one note on that is like when I was evaluating Tyquan Thornton at Baylor, there was a lot of times he would get moved off the line of scrimmage, or he would not be able to stack on a DB and he would get widened almost to the sideline at times. And then other times he'd run away from guys and it would be exciting. Doesn't feel to me, and I'm not saying it never happens, but Kyle Williams doesn't get pushed around like
No.
Tyquan Thornton did. And I think, just to your point, I think that's the key difference, because yeah, there are some similarities. Maybe some Patriots fans have some PTSD from Tyquan Thornton, but I just, that's one positive note, that Tyquan Thornton would get pushed around sometimes at Baylor. I didn't see that so much with Kyle Williams.
Well, the other thing to keep in mind here is, and I do want to come back to the receiver conversation for a sec. Clearly, there's an emphasis again on relative athletic scores. And when you look at the guys they picked, they took guys with high RAS scores. So when you look at that and you come back to Tyquan Thornton, and he was the RAS darling of that draft class, and that was when Matt Groh was infatuated with speed. They're clearly back to doing that, but my feeling is that the approach this time around is different, though. They're not looking to add speed because, well, that's what you're supposed to do. That's how it felt when they drafted Thornton. I didn't like that pick. I thought they overpicked him in the second round. I thought he was a guy that was more of an end of the second, early third round type of player. And it just felt like Groh and Belichick at that point were saying, see, we're willing to draft speed. What are you talking about? This, I feel, is a similar approach, but with a purpose. They truly, genuinely want to add a big play element to this offense. Who do you see as potential odd men out real quick? And again, we're going to talk about it again.
And just put one note on that. I'm glad you brought that up, because like 2022, like Pierre Strong, they drafted because of relative athletic score. Like Travion Henderson's fast, but he's a better player. Like Cole Strange, relative athletic score was the first. Will Campbell, yeah, relative, he's a better player. So like, yeah, they drafted guys with good relative athletic scores this year, but that are also better players. Like,
yep.
I think, and I might be wrong, but it was like Chasen Hines or Andrew Stuber. One of those guys had a high relative athletic score, but I would take Jared Wilson over both those guys, right? So it's like, I think to your point, yeah, the relative athletic score is a factor again, but it feels more coherent than maybe in 2022. So yeah, that receiver room, like I would add Pop Douglas as kind of a lock to make it, because I think if you look at what he did with Bill O'Brien a couple years ago, and I know last year it wasn't there quite as much, but I see him fitting with McDaniels more like he fit with O'Brien a couple years ago. And I think McDaniels wants that guy. So, but then already, I mean, we're at 4 names. And are they going to, I mean, do they go as far as to carry 7? But then if they carry 7, are you only going to carry 2 tight ends? Like that's what, like that's the trade-off. Like, and you're probably going to carry 7 offensive linemen because you have so many young ones that are developing. And then it's like, I love Kendrick Bourne, like 800 yards receiving in 2021, was on pace to have a career year in 2023 before injury, but I mean, he could be an odd man out. I think Kayshon Boutte could be an odd man out as well. And I think Javon Baker. Like, I think you're going to have a receiver room that is Stephon Diggs, Mac Hollins, and then 4 young guys after that. I mean, again, and I love Bourne. I hope they find a way to keep him. It's just, it's going to be tough roster building wise to carry more than 6, unless you carry 2 tight ends or 2 quarterbacks or 1 less safety. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it also begs the question, did Javon Baker actually get a fair shake? I want to see what he can do. I don't think he's gotten a fair shake. I know he got into some trouble at the beginning of the season, but after that incident, he literally disappeared. I don't know. Did he move into Henry Hill's old neighborhood? Like, I don't know what happened. Like, he went into witness protection. So I want to see what he can do. He made a couple of wild plays in camp, but he's a big body. He's a guy that has really good body control in one-on-one contested catch situations. He's a guy that's really smooth for his size, getting in and out of cuts. He can be sluggish at times, depending on what the route is. But I'm not ready to give up on Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. I would rather keep them on this team right now than a veteran, because in many ways, they could end up developing in this system. They could be nice pieces. I don't see them carrying 7 receivers. And again, we're going to talk about it ad nauseum probably the next few weeks and months. But I just think it makes for an interesting dynamic there. But I do think ultimately, to your point, John, one of those 2 guys will probably end up being an odd man out.
Yeah, and I think your goal, and I would say the same thing about the offensive line with Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson from last year.
Yeah.
If out of those 2 guys, Polk and Baker, one of them ends up being a good player, I think you'd be satisfied, considering how bad the production was last year. You mentioned Baker disappeared. I mean, Polk couldn't even line up right at times last year. if you can get one good player out of those two, and then same on the offensive line with Wallace and Robinson, if you can get one good player out of the two of them, I think you'd be satisfied and move on.
Yeah. No, I agree. Now, with pick 95 in the third round, after a couple of trades down, they took guard center Jared Wilson out of Georgia. And look, I think when you look at this pick again, going back to the relative athletic score aspect of it, I mean, this is a guy who ran a 4.840 at the combine, 6'3", 310, predominantly a center, only played 93 snaps of guard. Although when you look at his RAS score and you watch him move laterally, John, I'm not sure I'm wasting, with all due respect to all our centers out there, and they're as athletic as they've ever been. I'm not sure I'm wasting that athleticism at center, because you're not going to pull your center more than maybe 4 or 5 times a game. Your guards, between outside zone, pin and pull, crack toss, you're going to pull those guys a lot more. I want to see him play guard. I think ultimately that's probably the best landing spot for him long term. Now, again, he's only been a 1-year starter, so there isn't a ton of tape on him. When he's been good, he's been good. You see the athleticism, you see the hand placement, you see that when he plays with a low pad level, he can get underneath guys and get consistent vertical movement. He's at his best laterally, though, but you also see him get set back a lot. He doesn't recreate the line of scrimmage. He needs to play stronger. There's definitely some fundamental work that he needs there, but there's a ton of upside here with this pick as well.
Yeah, I'd say the same thing about him that I'm going to say later about Braden Swinson, the defensive end they took out of LSU, is if this dude was playing for more than 1 year as a starter, I think he would have gone much higher, because you see so much of the potential there. I mean, it's a second team all SEC guy, and he's a 1-year starter at center. Like, you see the potential there. And I think like the guard center thing, that might come down to Layden Robinson. Like, if he's a really good starting guard, like ends up being that, then they'll keep Wilson at center. If not, they can move him. But yeah, I agree with you that I feel like they have Bradbury for a year, and then Wilson's kind of got the year to develop, and then maybe can take over for 2026 as your starting center. We'll see. I mean, David Andrews came in from Georgia as an undrafted free agent and won the center job right away, right? Brian Stork the year before was a 4th-round pick who needed some development and won the center job kind of right away. So we'll see if Wilson can do something. Now, those guys, granted, had more experience than Wilson. And Wilson, I think, didn't even start playing football to high school. So he's just been, he's had limited time playing football, let alone starting. But like, I think to your point, the athleticism here stands out. And if he can just channel that athleticism into good, consistent fundamentals, then I think you can have yourself a really good player in the middle of your offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And he was a pleasure to talk to on Friday night. Character talked about the fact that he's into snakes, and he was his mother had given him a snake as a gift when he was a kid. They ended up moving in with his grandfather. The grandfather said, "No way, you're bringing the snake here." He was asked if he was going to purchase a snake once he gets up here and he gets settled in, and he said yes. Really mature, well-spoken, articulate. He's going to be a pleasure to cover. I think a lot of this class is going to be great to cover. You are watching Patriots Pulse. I'm your host, John Sarianides. As always, I'm joined by my partner, WEI's John Lyons, and we're recapping this weekend's NFL draft for the Patriots. As always, I know it's a Sunday morning. We've got a bunch of folks watching the show right now. We appreciate that. Feel free to join the conversation. What was your favorite pick? What player you like? What player you might be a little iffy on? What player do you wish they went out and got instead? Any opinions that you have in regards to this weekend's draft, feel free to share them with us. This is a show for the fans and the folks out there, so we welcome your takes. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to talk some football with you on this Sunday morning. All right, now let's go on to day 3 yesterday, and with the first pick in round 4, pick 106, the Patriots, in many people's eyes, reached for a player here. I don't think he's a reach, and this goes back to what I've always said about the NFL draft, John, and I've said this for 25 years. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Just because you and I have an opinion on a certain player doesn't mean that the organization that drafted him is going to have the same opinion. They drafted safety Craig Woodson from Cal. Woodson played at Cal for 6 years. For 6 years. He's 24 years old, multi-year starter.
He's on a second contract.
I love this pick. He is a prototypical Patriot in a lot of ways. Smart, a 3-level player, can play in 3 safety packages. You can screw him down on the slot against a back or a tight end that's aligned in the slot. I think he could cover most third receivers in 11 personnel. There's a lot to really like about his game. He can also play special teams. He's long, he's lean. They haven't had a true free safety type really since Devin McCourty. I think he might be the closest thing. I loved watching his tape, especially when he would cover backside routes and he'd have to flip his hips and make a baseball turn and get underneath that route, which is one of the toughest coverage assignments in football. He made that look routine. This is a good football player who I think, in my opinion, went right where he should have.
So I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I was kind of hoping they'd wait on safety once Andrew Makuba went off the board, but I do like the player. So I know it sounds like I'm talking out
No,
like
I agree with you. It
I
wasn't
wish
a need on
yeah,
paper.
I
But
wish
there
they
is more uncertainty at safety, I think, that people recognize, though.
yeah, and you and I have kind of talked about that a little bit. And when I look at Craig Woodson, like 328 snaps last year at free safety, 255 snaps at box safety. So he's done both positions. I mean, he played some slot corner really as well. I know it's like he's lines up as a safety, but he's covered guys in the slot. And I wonder if this pick, John, is a lot about their 2026 safety group because
Yep.
Jabril Peppers turns 30 this year and there's an out on his contract after this year. Kyle Duggar has an out on his contract after this year. If they and Marte Mapu you and I talked about this in January. There were only 3 players last year that I thought got better during the season. Part of that was a big coaching problem. But there are only 3 guys, and it was Drake May, Joe Milton, and Marte Mapu. And I wonder if they look at Mapu and say Mapu and Woodson can be our safety tandem of the future. And I don't know, maybe that's projecting too much on Marte Mapu, but I do wonder if that's part of it because it's funny. You mentioned free safety. When I was watching Woodson, I was thinking box safety. I was thinking because the way he comes downhill against the run and the way he can cover guys in short areas and even the way he rushed the passer at times, I was like, man, this could be a box safety
I don't
downhill.
want to put too much pressure on the kid. I don't think he's as big, but when you watch his film, and you have to watch the All 22 of any player that you're evaluating in the draft. If you're not watching the All 22, then you're not. Highlight films don't count. So let's stop wasting time with that bullshit. But when you watch his All 22, to your point, when you look at his versatility, you see a lot of Rodney Harrison there, where, like you said, he can play at all 3 levels. He's really good in terms of recognizing plays, clicking his feet, and getting downhill in short areas. That's a strength of his. So I agree with you. I mean, yeah, I loved him over the top and single high stuff, but I do think he's probably at his best playing downhill or breaking the huddle as a box safety in an 8-man front.
And there's safety room, as I mentioned, like there's like Duggar and Peppers are going to play, right? But there is some like long-term uncertainty there. And I feel like Woodson can be a guy. And we also talked about a month or so ago. Where does Mike Vrabel fall on the 3 safety versus 3 corner nickel packages? What does he like better? And because you can have Marcus Jones as your 3rd corner, maybe you could have Craig Woodson as your 3rd safety for now. And obviously you have Mapu as well. So I almost feel like they're telling us a little bit they're going to do more 3 safety packages as opposed to 3 corners going for, not to say that Marcus Jones won't play, but I wonder if this signals that they're leaning a little bit more towards the 3 safety packages. And to me, his slot corner experience kind of highlights that. But yeah, like I said, I know it sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I wish they had waited on safety, but this particular player I do like, and I think could have not maybe a massive impact as a rookie, but I think he's going to make some plays, and I think he's going to be on special teams as well.
And I think long term, to your point, I think he's going to be in the starter pitcher for them at safety. Now, staying in the 4th round at pick 35, pick 137, I thought this was one of their best picks. They take Joshua Farmer, defensive tackle out of Florida State. When you look at this Mike Vrabel, Terrell Williams defense, John, it's going to be predominantly a 40 front defense. That's going to be their base. Off of that, they're going to get into some 30 fronts. They might get into some 20 fronts. They're going to play like everybody else does. They're going to play a lot of nickel, a lot of 3 safety, a lot of sub-package stuff. But one of the things that I think you're going to notice that's going to be a little different than what we've seen the last 20-plus years, really, is that they're going to be more of an attacking one gap, get up the field, reset the line of scrimmage type scheme. And I think Joshua Farmer fits that to a T. You're talking about a guy who's a little north of 6'3", 305 pounds. Short area quickness is the name of the game with this dude. He shoots his hands well. He's got good burst off the ball. He can play in tight quarters, and he's a guy that's disruptive. And he's going to rush the passer. He plays with really natural lean and bend when he gets into his pass rush. So he is the epitome of old Mickey Andrews in the old Florida State 4-3 used to call them rushmen. He's that kind of guy. He's the ideal three technique in this scheme. He's got length to him, which they require out of their three techs in this scheme. I love this pick. I think he's going to immediately jump in and join that interior defensive tackle rotation with Barmore and Milton Williams. I think he's a guy that could make more of an impact as a rookie than people think, or he could end up making as much of an impact as some of these other guys.
And it's funny because a lot of times when we talk about defensive linemen, we always talk about, right, that first step and how are they right off the ball? How are their hands? How is that first step with their feet? And he's fine, he's good there. But I actually, when he gets going, he doesn't get slowed down. Like when he penetrates, and
He's a bull in the china shop,
especially in the pass game. And I would like to see a little bit more from him in the run game. And it was honestly, and you're more of an expert on this than I am, but it was a little tough to evaluate because Florida State was so bad last year too. Yeah. Like it was like, what at times, what were they doing defensively? You know what I mean? And just they were out of a lot of games too. So maybe I would like to see a little more in the run game, a little bit more taking up space, a little bit more bringing guys down right at the line of scrimmage. But again, part of that.
One of the things I said when I watched his film. He struggles. He's going to struggle against vertical double teams. He's going to struggle against teams that are going to be able to establish that vertical double and get him moving. He's at his best when he can win at the snap and reset the line of scrimmage. If he's engaged, especially on first down, second and short, third and short, that's where you see some chinks in the armor in terms of his game. He's at his best medium and long downs when he can elongate his stance and get vertical.
And that's why it's still a thing, and I feel like I'm a broken record here, but they need a big guy that can stuff the run consistently. And Farmer, I think, has the potential to develop into that. I don't think he's that guy right now. Like Deone Walker, who the Bills drafted, I think would have been more that guy. Needs to add some muscle on his lower half, but I think he would have been more that guy. So I would like to see, like, that's honestly, when you and I go to training camp, that's probably going to be the biggest thing I'm watching. Like, how does Joshua Farmer look against the run? Because let's say I'm wrong and he becomes a pretty good run defender. He'll play a lot because then you know what they'll do. They'll put Barmore next to him. They'll put Milton Williams at defensive end at times. They'll put Keon White there. They'll rotate with Anthony. Like, they'll do all this different stuff if he shows he can hold up in the run game. If he ends up being,
I don't think he's a guy that's going to play on the edge, but I think obviously Williams can, and I think Barmore can. Yeah. We've seen Barmore play.
And Keon White can play inside. Before. Like they kicked him inside last year. So
play the 4-4-eye.
Yeah. So that's why, again, to me, the biggest thing I'm watching with him is, can he develop as a run defender? Because I think as a pass rusher, an interior pass rusher, the skills are there. Like, he's already good. I think it's, can he develop into a run defender? So I like the player. I have a couple of questions about exactly the long-term development fit. But again, I agree that he's going to have some impact as a rookie because they're going to throw him in on some passing downs and he's going to penetrate and he's going to make some plays.
Now in round 5, they took what I think could be perhaps their most intriguing pick in terms of ability. They took edge Braden Swinson out of LSU with pick 146 of the 5th round. Look, I love his size, 6'4", about 255, 260. I love his size. I love his twitchiness. I love his athleticism. I love him as a pass rusher. He's got an explosive first step, uses his length well. He uses his hands well. But I think he's too twitchy sometimes. And while I think he makes a lot of plays surfing the line of scrimmage and sinking down from the backside, I also think when you go back and you watch his All-22, John, he's also making a lot of plays from behind when the ball's about 5 yards up the field. The other thing is he played 90% of his snaps, I would have to say, were in a tilt wide 5. He's not going to be able to do that in the NFL as much. He's going to have to play in a tight 5. He's going to have to play as a 7 technique at times. He might even have to kick inside to a 6-eye inside shade of a tight end. In my view, I like the player. I think he has a potential to be an integral part of this front moving forward. But if you ask me right now, there's no way on earth I'm playing this dude on a rundown. This dude is a sub package, rush the passer, pass rush specialist until he proves to me that he can stone people, get his hands on him, sink, drop his ass, anchor, and set an edge. If he can't do that, I'm not playing him on 1st and 10. I'm not playing him on 2nd and medium and short, 3rd and medium and short. I'm strictly playing him in 2nd and long and 3rd and long situations in a sub package.
I mentioned before that I thought Kyle Williams was the riskiest pick of the draft for the Patriots. I think this is the most interesting pick of the draft for the Patriots because 6'4", 250. I mean, he had 9 sacks last year in 43 quarterback hurries in just a regular season of college football. I mean, that's pretty damn impressive. And to your point about the run game, I agree the weakness is there. But this dude played 591 snaps last year. That's more than 2022 and 2023 combined. So much like Jared Wilson, this guy needs a year, I think, to develop, or at least half a season to develop. I could see him like I
He had
think his
58 tackles and 8.5 sacks, so he maximized his reps. He maximized his snaps.
And I think this guy, if he his ceiling to me is a better version of Joshua Uche, where like he's a really good pass rusher. Maybe you can put him in on some rundowns, but again, he's not Anthony Jennings that's going to really set the edge in the run game. Like I'm not trusting him fully there. But if that's what you get at pick 146, I think that's really good. Now, the floor of him is a guy that struggles to get on in a rotation because he gets pushed around because he can't line up as wide and you can't trust him against the run game. So I think this is their most interesting pick because I think there is a ton of potential there. And I think there is a fit there as well for the Patriots. It's just, he's going to need, much like Jared Wilson, I think he's going to need half a year to a year to really continue to develop.
Ken Matthias checks in. Good morning, Ken. What's the both of you guys' biggest takeaway from all the draft picks? And besides Campbell and Henderson, who can come in day one and be impactful, contribute right away? Well, I think you just answered your own question, brother. I think those two guys. Those are the two guys that I think are going to make the most impact right out of the gate, and probably Borregales, the kicker, because he's your kicker more than likely. He's going to make the team. He was the best kicker in this draft. Those are probably the two guys that I think are going to make the most impact right out of the gate. But going back to Swinson, you mentioned Josh Uche. When I look at him, I actually see a lot of a guy that they signed this offseason, another former LSU Tiger. I see a lot of Caleb Chase on there. He's a bigger version, but I do think if you can get him to use his hands the right way and you can get him to play the position the right way, in other words, he has to become a complete player. It can't be, you can live with him being a sub-package guy, John, but in my view, he has to become a complete player. There's too much talent there for him not to do it. But again, when you watch his all-22, there's a lot of, he's twitchy, but I don't like this Olay bullshit. And there's a lot of Olay bullshit on his tape. And he's got to learn to fundamentally play the defensive end edge position. And what I mean by that is, he's got to slow down a little, believe it or not. He's got to slow things down a little bit physically. He's got to really work on getting handsy with people, and he's got to use that reach. He's got that length. Use it to your advantage when you stack and shed. He doesn't do that. He works around blocks a lot, and I think that in the NFL, you can get away with that even in the SEC. But in the NFL, when you go up against an experienced left tackle or even an experienced right tackle, if let's say he's a wide 9, those guys are going to know they've got enough tricks in their bags that they're going to know how to handle a guy like that at times will take himself out of play. So while I know that all the future draftniks of America love this pick and he was my guy and I had him pegged, I mocked him to the Patriots 585 times in my 1,000 mock drafts. At the end of the day, there's a lot more to him there. He's talented. But take it from two football coaches. We both have coached for a long time. He needs a lot of work. And Mike Vrabel would tell you that, and so would Terrell Williams. So,
and I think that's where
he has the potential to be good, but he's got to fix some stuff on the
and hopefully, and I'll tie this into the Farmer pick, hopefully your DC being a legit good D-line coach is a help there, right? Because then he'll know exactly how he wants to. Yeah, and not just with their development, but he'll know right away exactly how he wants to use those guys. So maybe the sneaky little part of it, which I think might help both of them.
All right, Borgales is going to be their kicker. Do we agree he was the best kicker in this class?
Yeah, the only
He
note
didn't
I would
miss an
bring up,
extra point. I think his kick rate was what, 94% last year, 18 of 19.
18 of 19, and then PATs, he was 62 of 62. The only reservation is never kicked in cold weather. Like, I went through his
He had
career
a
at my
56-yarder last year as a long.
yeah, and he had a game actually at BC in November of 2023 where the game was in the low to mid 40s the whole game,
I
and
was there. I covered that game.
yeah, that's the coldest game. He's even the Pinstripe Bowl a month later
Yeah.
was a warm 50-degree day in New York. So yeah, I went through weather reports. Look at this guy up, lucky me. But yeah, I think he's
I
probably
will say he was
best kicker
impressive
in the
when
he's got
I
a great
covered
leg.
that game.
He's
He
got a
was
great leg.
impressive in person. He can kick the shit out of the ball.
And
I know
honestly,
that
John,
that's
my
expert kicking analysis right there, but
my biggest
my
takeaway,
scouting report, he can kick the shit out of the ball.
this is the third kicker they freaking drafted this decade. I want it to be the last one. Just
Yeah.
be good and let that be the end of it. I don't want to be Justin Rarhauser, Chad Ryland, now Andres Morales. Like, okay, no more kickers drafted. Okay,
Yeah.
just be good and move on. Okay, no
Yeah.
disrespect to kickers.
And I think he'll be the best of
yeah.
that lot. He's way better than both of those guys. So
Yeah, his leg,
more
and I
consistent.
will say, like, on an actual note, like, his leg is electric, like you said.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Seeing him kick in person, man, during pregame, I mean, and not only that, he's a really good directional kicker, which is going to help up here when you get those late October, early November days when the wind is howling up there at Gillette. He's going to be able to cut through that wind and directionally kick, which I think is important. Now, in round 7 at pick 220, they finally got an arm length guy. They got an offensive tackle with arm length, 34.5-inch arms. They're John Lyons. And Marcus Bryant, who was a left tackle for a year at LSU, he played opposite Armand Membu, who was the much more heralded tackle between the two. He was their right tackle. Previous to that, Bryant spent 4 years at SMU. He transferred to Missouri, where he played last year, 6'7", 320 pounds. And if you went into a dictionary and you looked up the word football project, it's not in the dictionary. But if it were a thing, if you went into a dictionary, a thesaurus, whatever it is, and you looked up project and you wanted to see what a football project looks like, he would be it. He would be it. I mean, if Doug Marrone is bored and wants to earn his money, this kid's going to make him earn his money. Look, 6'7", 320, athletic, has good feet. But, John, this kid needs to learn how to bend. If he doesn't bend, it's not going to matter. And I know, again, all the little young 20-ish draft experts out there were like, I love this pick. It's amazing. But at the end of the day,
is that their actual voice?
Yes, I had him mocked.
Yeah, look, so, but on your point about that, right? Like, you take a dude at 220, he's there at 220 because there's something he needs work on, right? It's not going to be like, yeah, he's their left tackle. Campbell's going to be the god, but like, it's going to take some. But I'll say this. If this dude develops,
by the way, not to cut you off, do you think people know what we're talking about when we do that voice? Can you explain it real quick?
You know what? I'll just let it marinate as itself. I'll let that.
Maybe one day we'll explain to you folks out there what that means.
Yeah, maybe one day, and then we'll cancel the show. But anyway, what I'm saying,
yeah,
like, if he's your rotational tackle long term, I think that's pretty good. Yeah. Like, I think, and that's what we're looking at.
I agree.
Right? Like, Will Campbell's going to be your left tackle. Right tackle is going to be Moses and maybe Caden Wallace eventually, who knows, like, or someone else.
Or him. So, Brian could be your right tackle.
Yeah. So does he develop into a better player than Vidarian Lowe? Like, really, that's what you're looking for. Because I think Vidarian Lowe right now is your swing tackle with Caden Wallace. Can he develop into a better player? And this is going to sound weird, and you correct me if I'm wrong. This dude's 6'7", 320. I think he could add 10 pounds of muscle as well, because at 6'7", you have a little more room on the frame to add some muscle. And to your point on the bending, like, you've watched him a little bit more than I have, some stiffness there. And that's, again, that's why he's there at 220.
Bend, you can't play. It's
right.
really not simple, especially for a tackle.
And that's why he's there at 220.
For any lineman, it's even more important for a guard. So if you can't bend, you can't play.
Yeah, and I think that's why he's there at 220. You know, so if he was a better bender, maybe he's a 3rd or 4th round pick, but, you know, it's a little stiff in the game. So
he's really athletic. I mean, he ran a 4.97 40 at that size. Think about that.
That's pretty good.
talking about letting things
Another
marinate. Let that
300-pound man
marinate
that runs
for a sec.
faster than me. Always great.
Yeah. Let
Him and
that
Chandler.
marinate for a sec. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he ran a 4.9740. So he is athletic.
And he was
not
first
only,
team
he's got
all
good feet.
AAC. A
Yeah.
couple of years ago at SMU. He's first team all AAC. So, like,
Yeah.
we're not sitting here saying he's not good. It's just when you pick a guy at 220, there's going to be, some things to work on.
But I can guarantee you that the reason he lasted this long is because he can't bend. Plain and simple. Because he's not a natural bender, because he has a hard time staying straight in his pass set, because he leans a lot. You watch his all 22, he leans a lot. Especially when you watch the lineman cut up, he leans a lot. So he needs a lot of work. But this is why you coach a line. This is why I've always said, John, when and if I want to return to full-time coaching, part of me just wants to go back to coaching the offensive line again. Give me a patch of grass. Give me about 6 hand shields, and just let me take those guys and develop them, and let me coach the hell out of them. That's what I want to do. And it's guys like this that motivate you to want to be an offensive line coach, because it's the best damn position to coach on a football team, and I think it's the best position to coach in all sports because it's so fundamentally and technically relevant, but at the same time, you really develop a bond with these guys. So, in my view, he's a project, and Doug Marone's going to earn his money. Do we need to talk about Ashby? Do we need to talk about a long snapper?
So, look, I thought the ghost of Bill Belichick came into the draft room and they took a long snapper. Like,
don't forget, he played for Belichick, Vrabel. So,
yeah, I
mean it's the end of the road for Joe Cardona. I think that's
it has to, like, and that's the first thing. And it's weird because I think Joe Cardona is good. I don't know, but like, yeah, you're not drafting a long snapper to have 2 on the roster. So, like, I think this draft pick to me is a signal that they want to move on from Cardona. Now, does Ashby play well enough in training camp to earn that? We'll have to wait and see. But this pick signals to me they want a rookie contract long snapper, and they're willing to move on from Cardona. That's what it signals to me.
Yeah, will Ashby do a good job being off to the side, practicing his long snap until special team periods, or not? More to come here on you.
Yeah, can't wait to look at that through the binoculars.
Yeah, and finally, Mr. Irrelevant. The Patriots picked Mr. Irrelevant this year. They took cornerback Kobe Minor out of Memphis. He's well-traveled. Also played at Texas Tech and Indiana for a year, 5'11", $180. When I watched, I couldn't get a lot on him. When I reached out to my all-22 guy, he had some scraps, and that's what I went off of. Looks to me like if he makes this team, it'll be primarily as a special teamer in terms of his technique, and you can check out the scouting report I put up on him on anyfootballjournal.com. He's better in off coverage, cover 3 quarters, where he can get into his back pedal, sink, read, and drive. That's the strength of his game. Holds his own in contested catch situations, but realistically speaking, John, if Minor's going to make this football team, it's going to have to be as a special teamer.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and you look at, we talked about their cornerback group, whether, it's got Gonzalez, you got Davis, you got Marcus Jones, feel like those guys. And I like Alex Austin personally as a guy to continue to develop. I mean, that's 4 guys right there. And then at safety, like, of course, they draft Woodson. I talked to they still have Duggar, they still have Peppers, they have Mapu, they have all these. Jalen Hawkins, could be in that mix as well. So I think this is a special teamer pick. And it's funny, I don't know how you felt, and I'm not going to lie and say that I watched a ton of his film, but from what I watched, I think he was a little bit better at Indiana 2 years ago than
I
he was
agree.
last year.
Yeah.
Not that he sucked
His
last year.
numbers were better last year in Memphis because he played a full season, but technically, fundamentally, I thought he popped more in a couple of the clips that I got from my all-22 guy. I thought he popped a little bit more at Indiana.
But you know what? And this is something too, and not to just kind of be general. I think, like, you have always talked about, hey, draft a quarterback every year or whatnot. I think you should invest in the defensive backfield every year, because this is something.
That's one criticism I have, John. I thought they should have taken a corner sooner in this draft. Yeah. I still think they were corners short. Even if they play more 3 safety packages and more nickel, I still think they were corners short.
Yeah, and I think it's something, again, I'd like to see them invest in DB every year, whether it's sometime on day 3 or whatever. So again, that's kind of a general comment, but Minor's a guy that they did that with.
Yeah. And this wasn't a great cornerback group. I mean, this was one of the weaker cornerback classes in the last
it was in
5-10 years. So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that wasn't a surprise. We don't do draft grades here at Patriots Pulse and New England Football Journal. Sorry, folks. I mean, Lyons, if you want to give him a grade, go ahead. I'm not giving him one. I refuse.
Give him a G or an H.
If you want to give him one, feel free.
No, I don't want to give him a grade yet, and I know I'm probably gonna have to do that, later on WEEI because mainstream media. But yeah, look, my thing with draft grades, I think you don't really know what draft grades are for 2 or 3 years realistically. But I will say this, I feel better about this draft than I have the last few. So I'll just say that, like, I do think they did a good job here. Like 2022, I came out of that draft like, man, they took a lot of risks here. I don't know about this. 2023, you know what? I could have given you a hug about Christian Gonzalez, but then I was like, man, they still didn't draft a tackle. I don't know about some of the rest of these guys. And then last year, it's so tough to tell because we like Drake May coming out, but then, and I like Caden Wallace coming out, but they got nothing out of so many of those guys. And some of it might have been coaching. We'll have to see. I personally feel better about this draft the day after it than I have the last few years. Probably the best I felt the day after a draft since 2021. So we'll see. And that was a draft that obviously Mac Jones ended up flaming out, but it got them Barmore, it got them Stevenson. So again, I'll just say that I don't have again, we don't do grades here at New England Football Journal. I'll just say I feel better about this draft the day after than I have the previous few.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that they drafted with a purpose, which is nice to see. They got younger, they got faster, they addressed needs. The draft is about filling needs, folks. I know people will talk about best player available. If you're good, you can take the best player available in the first
Like the
round. If you're
Eagles.
not, especially day one, even day two, you're drafting for need. Day three is really the day where you could start to take best player available when you're building a roster. But I think they did a really good job. Final thoughts here, real quick. Here, we got about a minute left. What is your final overall thought here? And I'll
Oh,
give you mine because I'm sitting at the porch right now, pointing out and yelling at the clouds. So
yeah, I know you're upset with the draft
I'm about
industrial
to. I'm about
complex.
to yell at the clouds.
I will just say, like, let me give a general thought because a lot of what you're going to say, I'm probably going to agree with. So let me give you a different thought. I think on the whole here, the Patriots had a really good offseason. And I know we got the offseason program and minicamp, but from Mike Vrabel to Josh McDaniels to Terrell Williams to Carlton Davis and Robert Spillane and Milton Williams to this draft class, again, you don't win games in March, you don't win games in April, but you build towards winning them in those months. And I think they had a really good offseason, probably the best offseason they've had at least since 2021, maybe even before that. So again, you don't win games in March and April, but you do build towards it. And I think they have some real concrete building blocks here now.
Yeah. Now I did warn John preemptively when we were doing our show prep before the show that I'm just going to quickly take a minute here and rail about what the draft has become. And I'm going to sound like the old man on my porch, yelling out into the street, into the clouds, and railing against everything, I guess. But I started covering the NFL draft in 2000. I was fortunate enough to get my break. The late great Norm Risha gave me my first shot at talking about the NFL draft on radio when he was at 96.9. And I remember joining him and Gary Tangway when they used to do a Sunday show, and I was their NFL draft analyst. And then I got an opportunity to work with Scouts Inc., Gary Horton, Todd McShay, and those guys. I worked with them in an internship role for about 6 months. And that's how I really learned how to cut my teeth as a scout and how to evaluate players. And I remember Gary Horton telling me that it's not about the draft is not about being right. It's about the players. Always make it about the players and evaluating them and giving people an honest opinion. Don't make it about being right about the player. And I think that that's what this business has become now. Unfortunately, 25 years of me doing this, I think that this business has become watered down. It's oversaturated. It's more about people doing a million mock drafts and being right. It's about passing out stupid draft grades. It's about saying, I liked this player. Mock drafts are now the equivalent to March Madness brackets. It's the same thing. People are pumping out multiple mock drafts a week. People are pretending like that they sit down and they break down all 22 tapes. Some people do this. A lot of people do this, but some people pretend like they're doing this and they're just parroting what other people are saying. What bothers me is it should never be about being right. It should be about giving people out there creating content that gives people an honest assessment about players. Now, look, I'm a coach. It's easier for me to honestly assess a player than the average person who covers the draft. But all of that being said, you can do that too. It should never be about being right in a mock draft. It should never be about giving a team the right grade or being critical of them and acting like as if somehow you know so much about this player that they don't know anything about him. And in many ways, John, I think this weekend was a watershed moment with Mel Kiper's reaction to Shedeur Sanders dropping. Because we all got into this business at one point or another because we were motivated by someone like Mel Kiper. I've reached out to Mel Kiper in the past, and he was very nice to me and honest with me, saying, I'd love to have you, but I can't pay you. And this was years ago. But all of that being said, it was a watershed moment because I think it illustrated even Kiper, as great as he is, and as much as he's the father of the modern draft, as great as he is, even he has now become that person where it's more about being right than it is about honestly assessing the players and going from there. And I think that I would like to see the industry change a little. I know that more and more people will enter the fray. I get it. That's human nature. We live in an oversaturated world. But I think at the end of the day, I hate what the draft has become. It really bothers me. And I hope that people get their bearings and realize that it's about giving an honest assessment about the player, and don't make it personal and don't make it about your mock draft. Just simply treat it like a scout. And if you do that, you will find that this process will be far more rewarding and far more enriching. That'll do it for this episode of Patriots Pulse. John, I want to say thank you for taking the time to chat this morning and break down the Patriots draft. Let's do it again next week. Let's do more Patriots talk next week.
Already looking forward to it, John. And now we're going to be advancing in the offseason. Draft's finally over. Going to be advancing to the next phase of the offseason coming up this week.
Plenty to talk about with OTAs and minicamp coming up. That'll do it for this week's episode of Patriots Pulse. For John Lyons, I'm John Sarianides.